Fantastic. And a hush falls over the congregation. As I ring this bowl, let's relax into this common time and space, and let's realize that we have a need to be together. We yearn for connection, the familiar faces of friends, and the sound of shared voices. Let's find an inner peace away from the hubbub of our daily lives for a while this morning. Let me welcome Freddie Granillo, and he'll offer us our prelude.
Hello, good morning. The song I'm going to play, I'm going to give you a little description of what I'm saying. It's in Spanish. And the name of the song is Flor de Pino, which means pine flower. And it's a song about saying goodbye to your love. And of course, promising to return one day because you're lost without her. De pino que corté para ti, tela de este joven vecino de Tilali, tiene la fragancia de una indita de acá, flor de jaralbaca que jamás morirá. Al pasar por Zacaclí, te preguntarán por mí, les dirás que me fui lejos, pero un día volveré. Porque no me hallo sin ti. Esta flor de pino que entre brumas nació es la que Sandino con su mano cortó para la muchachita que escogió para él, la telegrafista Flor de San Rafael. Al pasar por Zacaclí, te preguntarán por mí, les dirás que me fui lejos, pero un día volveré, porque no me hallo sin ti. Al pasar por Zacaclí, te preguntarán por mí, les dirás que me fui lejos, pero un día volveré, porque no me hallo sin ti. Thank you.
Thank you. That sure makes my announcements easier. Good morning, friends, neighbors, and visitors, both here in the sanctuary and joining us on Zoom. Our mission, as noted on the front of your order of service, is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. I'm Jan Sprinkle, worship leader today, joined by our regular minister, Reverend Sue Browning, for the service today, providing special music in addition to Michael Casey, is Freddie Granillo, who you have already heard, providing a very welcome addition. I have just a couple of very brief announcements. One, the new photo directories are now available on the table in the lobby. Please pick up a copy as you wish. And second, as noted in the program, there is a Halloween-based potluck coming on October 20th. So please see the whiteboard again in the lobby for more details. Let us now light the chalice. Sue will lead you in the words, and I will hopefully light the chalice.
And I see some of our younger learners have come in. You're welcome here and you're welcome in the back, whatever is working for you. It is so good to see you. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a candle, a chalice at the beginning of service to remind us of our special time together. The words that we're going to use today are in your order of service. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts. You know, we have the hymn and the opening words in opposite order of usual. You get to make the call as to which order.
Do you feel like singing? This is not a democracy. I think we should sing. So Freddie, if you can get ready to help us, it's hymn 305. Note the last verses in Spanish. And now in Spanish. I don't know what it says, but we sounded better in the Spanish, and it had to be Freddie helping. For my opening words, I have an adaptation from Thomas Merton. We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been. A revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid. Acknowledgements. Do you want to
I think it's time for centering first. We've done that. We've got it straight. We're good. Stick with this one. As Jan and I have planned the service today, we're very aware of so much that's going on in the world. We had a service, and we still have a service about immigration stories, but what we want to lift up today fits with that Thomas Merton reading, the complexities of life, the places where we're not going to figure out in 1 hour together answers. But hopefully, we will listen with love. We will think about what it means anywhere in the world where people are dehumanized and that they need to come together for times of reflection. The prayer that I picked, our time for centering, is influenced by something written by Rabbi Sheila Weinberg. She's part of the Jewish community in Amherst, Massachusetts, and she picked it from someone else, so we adapt away. I invite us all into a time of reflection. Praying together, 2 peoples, 1 land, 3 faiths, 1 root, 1 earth, 1 mother, 1 sky, 1 beginning, 1 future, 1 destiny, 1 broken heart. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, grant us a vision of unity. May we see the many in the one and the one in the many. May you, life of all worlds, source of all amazing differences, help us see clearly, guide us gently and firmly toward each other, toward peace. We offer those words, and let's just have a moment of silence as we think not only of what's going on in the Middle East, but in many corners of the world, the way people move toward safety, the way people are welcomed when they arrive. For the many ways we gather, we are grateful. Now we'll do acknowledgements of the heart.
This is the time in the service for you to share the joys and concerns that you hold. Since we are arranged as we are, I will hold the mic here for you, or you can come up to the podium, and I will light the candles for you as you have joys and concerns to share. And for those on Zoom, please wave to John, and he will pick up on your announcements. Thank you. And let me light the first candle in response to what Sue has mentioned on the events of the world these past week or two. It can't get any better, and it's something that we all hold in our hearts.
Yesterday, I had the privilege of spending 12 hours with Linda Dutton. We had a field trip yesterday to Goucher College, where we attended the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. And it was inspirational, sometimes an endurance test. I wasn't accustomed to listening to 8 speakers in, 4 hours or whatever. But again, it was a moment where I think both of us came back re-energized and encouraged by the collective actions that people are taking to memorialize events that should be memorialized.
I just have a personal joy to add a little gladness to what has been a difficult week. My husband turned 87 today. When he was 17 and lived in Illinois, he went off to college in the East. He didn't know very many other people who had ever gone off to college in the East. He was given a room on a fifth floor walk-up. They had too many people who had come into college that year. He began feeling crummy as things went on, and finally the first day of classes came, and he was having trouble walking out of the room, and a professor of the class came up and asked if he needed any help and ended up taking him to the infirmary. That's when he was one of the last people in the country to get polio, because it was the year before the vaccine came out. We have had 60 wonderful years together, and I just wanted to tell you how happy I am to know him.
I would ask, do we have anyone who turned 101 this week?
A 101 is certainly a milestone, but you need to know, living in Heron Point, there's no shortage of centenarians there.
Should we play or sing Happy Birthday?
I think that would be wonderful. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sonia. Happy birthday to you. For these shared joys and concerns, and for those that continue to be held in our hearts, let's please observe a moment of silence. Blessed be. As we are now prepared to pass the baskets for the offertory, and let me remind you of Marilee's explanation of the recipient of our monthly donation, and I can't remember the exact name of it.
Democracy, you have to specify that at this point, because today's a regular clerk.
Yes, okay. Never mind. And as we pass the basket, please be generous, and let me invite Freddie back up. Oh, this is Michael.
I'm playing the offertory.
Oh, there you go. I need to change my program.
This is a selection from Robert Schumann's Kindersehen. This is von Fremden Länder und Menschen, about foreign lands and people.
Thank you for your generosity to this community. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from Parker Palmer's book, Healing the Heart of Democracy. It struck me as we prepared for today that this really is a continuation on so many of the messages you heard about democracy last week as people were thinking about that. The reading. Heart is a word that reaches far beyond our feelings. It points to a larger way of knowing, of receiving and reflecting on our experience that goes deeper than the mind alone can take us. The heart is where we integrate intellect with the rest of our faculties, such as emotion, imagination, and intuition. It is where we learn how to think the world together, not apart, and find the courage to act on what we know. If you hold your knowledge of self and the world wholeheartedly, your heart will get broken by loss, failure, defeat, betrayal, or death. What happens next to you and to the world around you depends on how your heart breaks. If it breaks into 1,000 pieces, the result may be anger, depression, or disengagement. But if it breaks open into a greater capacity to hold the complexities and contradiction of human experience, the result may be new life. Our theme for this month, we have these Soul Matters themes. We subscribe to some packets, and we actually, our children this month in different ways, they're also looking at different ways to think about this. But our theme this month is heritage. And heritage is something handed down from the past. It could be a tradition, it could be something you eat, or heritage of belonging or being part of a group. It can be inherited stuff. Some of us have too much stuff, not the right stuff. It could be heirlooms, things we can't quite part with, and property and funds. But I also want to think about heritage sometimes as passed down hardship. The passed down realities of poverty, of oppression. There's a lot that gets into that word of what we pass down. And for many of us, we sit with the realities of what came before us. Our ancestors' decisions, our own experiences, from wars to the location of our homes. And I've thought a lot about movement of people. We think about migration, and we can get very specific as what it means to move from one country or to another, but we all at some point have migrated. We are our ancestors' children, and two, we are becoming ancestors every day. We are personally and collectively a link in a chain. Last week in Sunday school in Easton, my other congregation, I didn't get to see this, but the kids did something called the human pretzel. And what they do in the human pretzel is they keep linking arms and say, what do we have in common? Kids that may not think they have anything in common. And once they found they had something in common, they could link their arms. And they did that until they had made the full circle with the adults that were working on them. To me, that's that beautiful image of ways that we are all connected. And yet, as I've thought about heritage in the context of this month, that image doesn't get lived out by the adults very well. It's been National Hispanic Heritage Month. It goes actually from September 15th to October 15th. Got that in? Today's the day where we celebrate the history, the cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and not only those who are currently citizens, folks who are home here for all sorts of reasons and experiences. Earlier this week, it was Indigenous Peoples Day. It was on Monday, and we're recognizing Indigenous communities in a different understanding, knowing not only what it means to move, to be moved, to know what it's like when people come in where you have long made your home. And then we have this week the history in the Middle East. A terrorist attack by Hamas. It is a terrorist organization in Israel on October 7th. and the ongoing ramifications of more death and destruction in the responses. And as I've thought about immigrants and immigration this week, I found these topics were blurring in my head. I realized I wasn't thinking of them that distinctly, and maybe that's part of the message. They're not that distinct. Human migration has been a part of our history. People have moved and people have been impacted by the transitions, and sometimes the welcome has gone really well. The community has stretched, engaged, been changed by, and creates a new beauty, like the song we sang, like De Coloris. But often that hasn't been the way it has gone. There's been resistance, there's been struggle. And like so many stories that have long histories and cultural realities, power dynamics, joy, pain, these legacies, what I feel like instead of those kids connected with all their elbows together is that somebody took a ball of twine and then they took another ball of twine and then they knotted it and they wound it up and they created this big thing, and now we think that with one decision or some way it will be unwound. But there are layers, there are knots, and there are intricacies. And as Jan offered in the reading by Thomas Merton, it doesn't mean we can avoid it. It just means it's complicated. And there's joy. I don't want to get lost as we tell some stories today about the joy that's out there as people have gotten to know one another. As we think about the experience of an immigrant or a community of immigrants, from all the needs or the policies, it's a challenge to think. But here's one thing I do know. If you are thinking in any part of your body, hey, I know the answer to the immigration issues. I know the answer to conflict in pick any area of the world. I know if we would just do more of X and less of Y, would be okay. You may want to answer the question, but my request is please don't. Please just pause, because there are no right now clear questions or simple answers. There's not even sort of a simple answer. And this is true when we consider Indigenous communities in the United States and current challenges, or Indigenous communities this week in Australia. It's true when we think about racial justice issues in the US and around the world. It is true when we consider Hispanic communities, some of which we're part of in all sorts of ways and connections. And it's true when we consider the conflicts in the Middle East. Before we even explore these realities, think of the layers and the stories. In my reading, I noted, if we let our hearts break open well, we'll have a greater capacity to hold the complexities and contradictions. Think about lots of things being true at once. And as you go through this, think about the different ways, lost that place, think about the misinformation that's out there. I will guarantee you, if you're hearing stuff, it's okay to be skeptical. If stories don't feel right, be skeptical. There is inaccurate information that is ramped up on all sides of all issues to make a point. There are some places where you may have facts that are provable, but if you only tell parts of the facts, that creates a different part of the story. Truth comes with nuance. The same story can be told authentically, honestly, and be true from two different perspectives. Think about that in your own lives. Think about your own experience, your own story. As you think about all this world and all these things, think about your own story. I was thinking about mine, which is pretty basic. I grew up in a pretty unremarkable childhood experience, middle class, suburbs. We had a swing set, and I was loved by my parents, by both my parents unconditionally. Well, pretty much. I was thinking about a few evenings during high school where there were a few conditions put on that type of love, but more or less it all went well. That's all true. But there were parts of my life it took me a long time to process. My parents fought often, a lot. We moved 5 times between 3rd grade and 11th grade. And in time, I knew my family's stress points, and I really tried hard at ages 6 or 10 or 25 to keep things all okay. That's my story. Moves came with costs and opportunities, but if I put either one of my siblings right up here for you, my brother who's 8 years younger or whatever, they would have a different view of our family life. I think as we process the world's conflict, it's good to realize many things can be true at the same time. But I know I've also wanted to label, whether it was my own childhood or local conditions or situations in the world, I want to label things as being good or bad, right or wrong. But the minute we start to see things in those boxes, we lose something. We lose the uniqueness of the stories and how things have been blended. And that's true when we move to geopolitical realities. Geopolitical is a new word I found this week because it sort of captures a lot of what I try to think about. When we've got geography going on, we've got different nation states, we've got different politics. And it is tempting to want to pick a side and to jump so we can do something and figure out what's right and what's wrong, and to imagine that that's how it works when group 1 and group 2 are in conflict. But it's not how it works. Some things can be totally wrong, and we need to name those. Basic safety, harm to others, all sorts of things can be wrong, and we need to name those. But it is difficult to get the intricacies of what has been passed to us. And if you think about that, it's really hard to imagine the future. How many people here saw the movie The Queen's Gambit? Movie I would highly recommend. It's accessible. It's a great movie for teens as well. So it's a protege. She's a chess player. She's young, and it came out a couple of years ago, and she's just brilliant. She is poor. She figures out, she's taught in a basement by a janitor how you play the game. But there's a scene that I've been thinking about this week. So she's there, she's going through all the international levels of chess championships. She is just brilliant, and it comes to one move. And she's sitting in this big hall, and she's picturing up on the ceiling all of the chess moves. She has this incredible spatial way of picturing all of the chess moves and picturing how it's going to play out. And that scene keeps coming to me because that's just a chess game. That's not people living out our stories. And yet that's sort of what needs to happen as leaders make some choices. There's complexity, and there's complexity in what we see as conflicts in the world, but there's complexities in immigration. And I am by no means an expert, and we will have some time for some stories after the sermon, and then we'll sing our final hymn. But here's a couple things about people on the move that are right in our own state. In Maryland, 15% of the population, about 1 million people, are foreign born. Another 750,000 are first generation. Almost 30% of the population in the state of Maryland has a direct tie to other countries. Some other data. About 80% of those who are foreign born report speaking English well or fairly well. Of the adult immigrants, over 40% have college degrees, and about 20% do not have a high school degree. I offer those statistics not because the numbers matter, but to understand the breadth of what is going on as we have movement of people. The movement of people is beautiful, it's lovely, it's happened to all of us, and it can get complicated. One of the people I talked to this week is a leader on immigration who I've known for about 15 years, and she's an elected official in the state of Virginia, and she immigrated from Bolivia in 1961. And she's served in many roles, but her passion is around the dreamers. Folks sometimes hear the term dreamers, but that is an acronym for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. These are kids who came when they were very young to the United States, And they don't fit into the boxes that we have imperfectly, horrendously created on how one gets some sorts of documentation. What she's done is amazing. Working with groups, it does both scholarships, works on different groups. She pointed out, though, the reality is that a dreamer, because we've still mucked it up, I'm not going to even pretend to know all the pieces, a dreamer can get all the way through nursing school and then be unauthorized to work. She shared that, yes, in the communities that she deals with, these are predominantly in Arlington, Virginia, and through her Catholic communities, they worry about deportation, but she does feel less risk under the current administration. But as I've talked to her, her name is Emma, she's a friend, I play bridge with her, do different things. What she wanted us to know is stories. I don't have a lot directly to offer you today, but if we don't get to know our neighbors or folks who are going to be our neighbors, or read or find stories or find ways to understand those stories, we're not going to understand the dreamers. I also asked her what's going well in the immigrant community. And this was interesting. She pointed out that where she sees most of the hope is in the schools. 40 years ago, there was a Supreme Court decision, Plyler versus Doe, and it was made that says everybody gets an education. We're not going to look at your status. It started in Texas, and she said things take that long, but they have positive impacts. So that's the place she finds hope. And it reminded me that it was just about 2 weeks ago that one of the congregants in Easton lit a candle of joy. She's an ESL teacher in the elementary schools there. And she says, we weren't talking about immigration or anything else. She was just giving her joy that she wishes we could be with her when we felt the energy every single morning with these kids in her elementary class, just the unadulterated joy of learning new stuff and being together. My friend also shared with me that folks coming today, the folks that are coming into the country, the most recent immigrants, and in the areas she works, they are from everywhere. They're from Afghanistan, they're from Haiti, they're from many, many places. However they come, whether they're documented with a temporary status or visas get overstayed, whatever happens, there is a growing set of needs. And she reminded me how much stories are spewed for political gain, and the harms are real to people. Stories are floated as fact, and all they do is stoke xenophobia. So that's what we hear sometimes. Sometimes those things are the reason we say, well, we don't have a national policy. We haven't had an update since God knows when, because we can't. Folks, we could. We've made choices not to. And it is hard and it is difficult. I've reflected on this immigration awareness as we've watched the news these past weeks. There are terrorist attacks that we need to denounce, and there is an additional pain. It's not a game, it's not a chessboard, and yet it has that complexity. I found myself pulling out books. I did a trip to Israel and Palestine in 2012. I've preached on it some, and I've tried to read things from multiple perspectives. And you hear the stories, you hear the risks and the complexity. And I hear all that, and I hear the calls for peace and the respect for humanity. And I recognize how hard it is to hold the loss that feels at a distance. I keep coming back to that reading. We need the capacity to hold the complexities and contradictions, because the result may be new life. There aren't that many people who understand the deep history. We were talking about a few in the thing, Thomas Friedman, there are a few others. People have asked, where are the Gandhis and the MLKs in this scenario? One thing I found is some of them are in jail. Creating peace that way wasn't acceptable. So we pray. We do pray. We pray to change our own hearts. We pray to pay attention to those in power, that they make sane decisions and they keep a path to peace possible. We support leaders that have some sort of vision. Our own president, Unitarian Universalist Association President, Reverend Dr. Sophia Bentecourt, in her statement last week said this. She asked us, at least theoretically, rhetorically more, how do we reconcile the cost of occupation and of war? How do we nuance two very real histories of oppression and violence? We as people of faith can condemn violence against civilians while at the same time engaging the full legacies and histories of oppression and this devastating context. She's reminded us too that Unitarian Universalists, particularly on this issue, more than on others, have not been able to have a good conversation. In 2018, we brought some related issues before the General Assembly, and there was some very painful name-calling. It was around the divestiture votes that had happened in a lot of Protestant churches almost 20 years behind. We did not adopt a position there, but there were fractures. And I remind us that we are not. In fact, because a lot of folks have a broad set of heritages in Unitarian Universalism, we don't have the conversations well. And she reminded us of that. And I think of that when I think of racial justice. I think of immigration. I think of Indigenous people. How do we aim toward peace, but not dismiss the histories? So I end both with questions and an invitation. We're going to do a shared reading together. What might we bring to this table today, my friends? Maybe we start with that willingness to pay deep attention, to name where trust has been broken. Maybe we come by holding hope for new life, for new ways of being, and to always remember we start first by changing ourselves. I invite us now to go to the back of our hymnal. It's reading number 602, and then we're going to have a little time for discussion. I will read the part in the bold type and ask the congregation to respond with the italics. If there is to be peace in the world, if there is to be peace in the nations, if there is to be peace in the cities, if there is to be peace between neighbors, if there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. We enter a time of discussion. We'll probably have about 5 minutes, and particularly if you've got an immigration story, your personal story, and would like to share for maybe, just a short version of that, or any other thoughts that the sermon brought up. Jan, maybe we can take that. We have a mic. Thank you. Jan will do that, and we are going to talk for 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next part.
I spent one summer when I was in law school working in immigration court in San Diego, and it changed my perspective on things. And I'll never forget, one day in the courtroom, there was a family from Afghanistan who were there for what in immigration law is called removal proceedings. And immigration court works a little bit differently than other courts, and it's on that day that a decision is going to be made. And the family is questioned by the judge. The judge is much more engaged in the process than in what we think of in courtrooms. And very quickly, he said, well, I've heard what I need to hear. I'm going to take a break, and I will come back and render my decision. So we're sitting there, and we gather together again, and he turned to this family, and he said, let me be the first to welcome you to the United States of America. Tears are streaming down, and one of the grandmothers who was there came up to me and said, "Thank you so much." And I tried to explain I had nothing to do with what just happened. I just was observing. And I went to the judge afterwards and I said, "Judge Bartomeo, if you had made another decision, I don't know what I would have done." And he said to me, "Callie, what other course did I have? What other course did I have?" And the discretion of immigration judges is something that is good and also very troubling, because this same family could have had a different judge that day in the courtroom in San Diego, and it might have gone another way. But I'll never forget it.
Thank you.
So as you were talking, I had another thought about immigration and actually how we immigrated here and how we have treated the indigenous people here. I worked on the Navajo Nation and on the Sioux Nation as a nurse, and we are still not holding space for the people that we pushed out. And so I feel like it's the opposite side of the same coin, in that we don't create space for people who we don't understand. And we need to work on the ones that we pushed out and the ones that we are welcoming in.
Yeah. And we mean so many different things in so many contexts, knowing there's so many backgrounds here. Thank you.
I think it's important to understand when people talk politically about immigration, that the reason why we haven't had any changes in our immigration for so long, and the reason we haven't solved our problem at the southern border, is because there are powerful interests that want immigration from the southern border for cheap labor that can be second-class non-citizens. And you see it all over the place, and I don't have to mention the different kinds of low-wage jobs where you see people who you have to ask yourself, you know, are they even being paid minimum wage? And can they ever come up from minimum wage in their situation?
Yeah, I think there's dynamics, and I think we need to be really honest with ourselves, folks. There's a lot on paper that's there, but where we have places of fear, because I think fear is put out there, and it integrates with the economics. Kim?
Hi, I'm the English language teacher at Queen Anne's County High School, so I work with the kids coming in all the time. There was a really interesting article in the New York Times, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you saw it, the boy who was working on the Eastern Shore, I believe, down south in a chicken factory or whatever you call it, and he got his arm caught in the deboner. He was, I think, 14, something like that. But they always give these false names and ages, and like what you're saying, I mean, we know. I mean, the companies know that these kids are too young. And my students, they all work. Some of them work all night. Like they'll work into the morning, to the wee hours, and then they'll come into school. I have so many stories. But have you ever heard of the Monster? The train that comes up from Guatemala called the Monster? And they sit on top, and just for I don't know how many days, and it's like 1,000 miles or something like that. They cling to the top. So sometimes they fall asleep, but you have to hold on, and you can't really fall asleep unless your mom is holding on to you or something. Or if you're, and then often they'll come by themselves. I mean, most of the kids at the high school level, I would say maybe half come as unaccompanied minors. So they come with coyotes or whatever. But the Monster is interesting because they'll get on around the Guatemalan border, and then they come almost all the way, not the whole way, just like clinging to the hot top. And they have these really scary stories of just the terrifying, like trying to stay on top, and all these other people are up there too. And then they come, but one of my students who came that way, it costs so much money, they have to pay so much money, and they send all this money down, and then they get these ways of coming up. But he came up, and then he got here, and then he got deported, and then he did it again. He like came on the Monster again. He made it 2 times. So, and then he just went into this system. It's almost like a slave class of working all these jobs, you know, as a 15-year-old that he shouldn't be doing, and working like essentially full time. And I don't know. It's like a problem that we're not even trying to solve, it seems like. We just kind of let it continue. I think we could do something about it if we wanted to. We could penalize companies who do this kind of thing. Well, why don't we? Just keep the costs down on food and so on. Anyway.
Yeah. And the other thing, when I was talking to my friend, she was also sharing that one of the messages, and again, I'm not trying to put it into make sense or not, but from the current administration is folks going down into Central America and further down and saying, don't come. Think about how that plays out too as a policy, which is it's going to be inconvenient if. And so I think there are some real realities. Is there anybody else? We've got some time. Does anybody else want to share who has some experiences? For it?
I just wanted to share something hopeful. My husband came to the States from Greece at 19. And obviously, there's a lot of history between Greece and Turkey. But he just did a lot of work in terms of paperwork so that his assistant, a female from Istanbul, could come to work with him at the college.
Yeah. Yeah. Stories come in so many flavors, and when you hear the personal places of connection, I find some hope. Rosie?
I'm sorry.
Another more hopeful thing is that we worked really hard this past month to do some celebrations in Chestertown for Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm always a process person. Like, I think the process is just as important as the outcome, and I think that this was a good experience in that because we were able to gather a group of local Latinas and Latinos to kind of organize the activities and put everything together, and the relationships that have been blossoming from that are continuing, and it was a very uplifting, like, creating an incredible space to celebrate and dance and do art and all of those things. So I hope that that can continue to grow, and I feel just personally that my relationships with a lot of people have deepened, and I've met many more people just from being able to have this conversation of like, hey, we're doing this thing, like, what do you think you could offer? What do you know? Or do you know anybody that could come and help us with this? And everybody's been super excited to be involved.
Yeah, one of my go-tos when the world feels overwhelming is go local. Go local, do something, take a walk, whatever, to meet some different people. And the Multicultural Center in Easton, I'm working on getting some of their stories. I work with both Victoria Gomez and Matthew Peters, and I'm on the social service board down there. So we hear lots of very hopeful things when it comes down to personal relationships and working through systems. And we need to hold that we've got some tough stuff going on in the world. Thank you for the stories. Our final hymn is We Would Be One. It is in your gray hymnal. It is hymn number 318.
Just
Please be seated. I'll offer our closing words, and Jan and I will extinguish the chalice. We'll have our benediction, and then is Freddie doing our postlude?
We'll be doing our postlude.
In gratitude. Thank you. We close pulling our hearts together. We close as both a cloud of witnesses on the shoulders of our ancestors, and knowing we are a link in the chain. We are the ancestors too. Go in love. Go in peace. Go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
So the last song I want to offer is a song that requires your voices in a really good moment. So it means not singing this song in the morning, but I'm going to do it because it's a proper song to play. And this song was, the lyric is from a poem that is called the Love Poem. And one of the most famous is the word, poet from my country, his name is Roque Dalton. He wrote this poem, and somebody took that poem and make it into a song. And this is a song of pride and bitterness for the Salvadorian people who have been displaced and persecuted and labeled all of the worst things: robbers, drug addicts, sex workers. But Roque Dalton, the poet, reclaims their humanity and declares them his compatriots and hermanos or brothers. Los que ampliaron el canal de Panamá son los guanacos, los mismos que se pudrieron en las cárceles de Guatemala, México, Honduras, Nicaragua. Por ladrones, por contrabandistas, por estafadores, por hambrientos, los siempre sospechosos de todo. Me permito remitirme al imperfecto por esquinero sospechoso y con el agravante de ser salvadoreño. De Ribete, Santaneco, para variar del barrio La Cruz. Los que lloraron borrachos por el himno nacional bajo el ciclón del Pacífico, las nieves del norte. Los primeros en sacar el cuchillo, los reyes de la página roja. Los que nunca sabe nadie de dónde son, los mejores artesanos del mundo, los que murieron de paludismo en el infierno de las bananeras. Can you help me doing this? There you go. todos los véndelo, todos los cómelo todo. Los tristes más tristes del mundo, mis compatriotas, mis hermanos. Thank you.
A special thanks to Freddie Granillo for sharing that gift.
Thank you. Go in peace.